Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad to be here, especially on stage with Gil Dibner. For those who don't know, my name is Daniel. I'm the CEO of Attentive, and Gil here, he's a prolific investor, and he's been investing in B2B startups for a long time. And he also leads the biggest AngelList syndicate outside of Europe. So I think it's going to be a really exciting talk.
Outside of the US.
Outside the US, sorry. And I think it's going to be a really exciting talk about B2B and what it means to be successful in this area, and also a lot about investing as well. So welcome, Gil.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Is your mic working?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, great. So first question is how did you become a VC and why, when? So can you tell us a little bit about your background there?
Sure. So I wanted to be an engineer, but I wasn't smart enough. And so VC was the closest I could come to dealing with innovative technology. And I moved to Israel in 2005 and have been a VC ever since. So did the Wall Street thing, was an investment analyst on Wall Street, and the internet boomed sort of 99 to 2003. And really got turned on by the wave of innovation that's been changing the way we do business and the way we invest and the way we think about our lives. And venture seemed like a logical, it's living vicariously through brilliant entrepreneurs.
Is there any, so you've obviously been very successful, but do you think are there any unspoken downsides, outside from the risk, of course, but from being an investor?
Yeah, I think I was once chatting with an emergency room doctor, and the guy said, my job is, you come in and I decide in quickly as possible if you're going to die or not. If I think you're going to die, I try to keep you from dying, and then I let you go, and other doctors kind of deal with you. And he was saying it's very frustrating for me as an emergency room doctor because I don't get to be intimately involved with your actual care, right? And I think there's a little bit of that dynamic with venture. Of course, we're involved, some cases I'm very involved, weekly or daily or monthly, but still the startup is the entrepreneur's startup, and you can have an amazing session on marketing or on product or strategy or something, and then someone else has to go and execute that, and that can be very, in a sense, frustrating because you want to get close to that and you want to stay involved, and when a company grows and hires the right people, hopefully they don't need my input on product on a regular basis. Hopefully that will stop at some point.
Great. So you've been focusing on B2B.
Yeah.
So I guess you started that way, and what kept you on B2B, and what did you find interesting there?
Well, the Israeli market really is about B2B, and that's where I was trained. And so I think what was interesting to me was I grew up in an environment where my colleagues were investing in semiconductors and in storage systems and in communications technologies and radio waves and all kinds of things that were really fundamental technology. And then as we moved through the waves of technology, we moved into data, and we moved into more software and infrastructure software and the whole infrastructure stack. That's kind of where I ended up focusing. So application software, lots of things that leverage data and analytics, and then on the infrastructure stack, dev tooling and stuff like that. And I think there's, for me, just something really exciting about entrepreneurs that are building something the world hasn't seen before. For me, that's what I'm looking for. I think if I have to make a confession, it's that I enjoy that more than I enjoy necessarily a fast-growing business that is doing something that other people are also doing. I kind of want to be involved with companies that are the only one in the world doing whatever it is that they're doing.
And speaking about those founders you were talking about, so clearly it's really important that you understand their vision and you agree with that vision that they have of the future when they're building. Do you think there's a few requirements, so when you were launching especially a B2B startup, that you need to have some vertical expertise or some enterprise experience? Do you think those things are crucial things for of course there's always outliers, but in general?
I mean, there is no rule, right? I think that when I think about investing, I think about it in terms of red flags and green flags, right? Okay. And an investment should have basically no red flags. There should be nothing that's seriously wrong with the business, but that's not enough. There needs to be green flags, and green flags can be anything. It could be crazy, amazing technology, and it could be deep domain expertise. And I believe that deep domain expertise, which very few founders have, but some founders do have, it's worth a lot. and particularly in the enterprise space. So that if someone comes to me and says, look, I've lived this problem for 10 years as a customer, and I'm building the tool that I wish I had, and I'm going to solve it, a lot of times it's a real act of passion. They're not doing it because they want to raise venture money. They're doing it because they wake up in the morning, they want to solve a problem, and venture is just a way to get there. That makes me, pretty interested.
And in terms of liquidity and about, you were just speaking about that when people look for VCs or angels, do you think that has changed over the years, where it's way cheaper now to actually build a company, to start at least, to grow, then it's a different thing? And do you think that the VC/business BBA world also had to adapt with smaller tickets or early tickets? How do you think that's shaped in the last few years?
It's a good question. I think it's become much more fragmented, which is, I think, good news for entrepreneurs. There's a lot of choice. There's a lot of angels. There's a lot of super angels. There's a lot of angel funds. There's a lot of seed funds. There's a lot of accelerators. Some accelerators invest money. Some accelerators don't. There's large funds that do seed. There's medium funds. There's every flavor of structure. But I think at the end of the day, what matters is the identity of the individual, right? The individual partner that's leading that deal, and how engaged are they really, and how much do they really understand the vision of the founder and commit themselves to supporting that vision and building that dialogue. One of the things that I've learned and observed is that, ironically, the more technological a company is, the more success is determined by the psychology of the founder, by the soft stuff, and by the intimate relationship that they develop with their investors and their board and their advisors, right? Because when you're doing something that's deeply innovative and therefore highly risky and never been done before, there isn't a playbook. There isn't another company out there that did this. So there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of challenges, a lot of stuff that we don't know the game plan. We're gonna have to figure it out together. And keeping communication really strong and being able to come back to your investors and say, look, we tried that thing we decided we were gonna do 2 quarters ago. I've tried that, it isn't working. I need more cash, and here's the new plan. Being able to have that conversation in a supportive environment with people that really understand what you did, why we did it, why it didn't work, what we're gonna do now, how you're thinking about the problem, what you've learned, like all of that stuff is that much more critical in an environment where you don't have the feedback. If your sales cycles are 9 months, it could take you 4 months to figure out that something's not working, right? If your R&D cycles are serious, you can't, it's nice to talk about sprints and whatever, but if you're building real technology, that can take four months to change a feature, right? And those kind of conversations require a ton of trust. And so I think the soft stuff is that much more important, which means it doesn't matter if you're raising money from a huge fund or from a seed fund or from an angel, whatever, it's the person. And I found that a person's, as a small investor, this is really important to me, the contribution that an investor makes to a company is not always correlated to the size of the check.
Right. So let's dig into that a little bit more. So which other things besides the check? I think you touched on a really, really important point, that is the communication, or the expectations of communication, the regular communication between the founders and the investors, to share things that worked out and things that didn't work out, and keeping that dialogue really, really, really open. Are there any other things that you think that the investors can add value on top of that?
Yeah, I think, different investors bring different kinds of value, right? So some investors are very operational and great with hiring and great with operational metrics and can help you with metrics and milestones and that kind of thing. Other investors have a ton of experience in sales, which is a whole, discipline. I mean, sales is very important, and some people just have a ton of experience in that. Others are domain expertise, or have invested in companies, or have amazing networks, and it's very important for a founder to be in control of his investors and in control of his cap table and control of his board, right? It's ultimately the founder's and the CEO's responsibility to figure out how you're constructing that syndicate to serve the company, right? And I think that's why the CEO's role can be the loneliest role, because the CEO interacts with everyone, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with him or her, and investors fit into that puzzle. Some of us, myself included, I try to be as helpful and as transparent, as engaged as possible, but at the end of the day, it's the CEO who needs to demand from me what he needs. I'm not going to harass him, or, so he or she needs to set the...
Yeah, the proactiveness needs to come from the founder as
Yeah.
they're facing challenges or they
Yeah.
need help in some specific areas.
And you see, just for example, you see it in a board meeting, right? The not effective companies are the companies where the board members, the investors are setting the agenda for the board meeting
Right.
and driving the conversation, right? The really effective companies are where the CEO says, okay, here's the update that you guys asked for. Any questions? Okay, this is what I want to address today. These are my 3 big problems. This is what I want help. You know, Gil, you said you could introduce me to these people. Now's the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
the CEO should manage that meeting as effectively as possible.
So we're talking about a lot of the relationship between investors and founders. And as we started the conversation, we were talking that you lead a really important syndicate, the biggest outside of the U.S. For AngelList. Can you tell us a little bit more? So that's a fairly new instrument, or at least a setup
Sure.
So we'd love to learn more about it.
So I was working at a fund in London and looking at some interesting B2B companies and starting to do angel investing because the companies I was looking at, had a hard time raising, and then I was sort of investing on my own. With the permission of my fund, obviously. And as an experiment, I set up an AngelList syndicate, and suddenly I saw that I had a bigger syndicate than the checks I could write myself, which were very small because I've invested in some great companies, but I haven't seen carry yet because I was too junior at the funds. So, I haven't made my millions yet. So my checks were really small. AngelList allows me to bring in a lot more money alongside me, and I'm investing in every deal. So it's a very sort of transparent. I put in $5,000, and the AngelList can be $100,000 or $300,000 alongside my 5, and I'm not getting a fee for that. So it's very clean. And so I realized, wow, this allows me to actually build, a nano fund in a sense. I'm very uncomfortable with the word angel because it makes people think that I'm wealthy and this is my money. It's really not my money. It's someone else's money. I actually think AngelList should rebrand because it's not really what they are. I mean, technically, but I don't feel like an angel. I feel like a fund. And so what I try to do is make sure that the entrepreneur has an experience that is as close as possible to the experience they would have with a small fund. And that means the way I think about exits is the same, the way I think about round structuring is the same, the way I think about the process is the same, the way I think about confidentiality is the same. So all of that gets worked out so that the CEO has a very clean experience, one line on the cap table, AngelList syndicate, with the check size, and hopefully we're syndicating a much larger round. So even though the largest check I've done from the AngelList is $300K, the largest round I've been in is a $3 million round. So I'm usually around 10% of the round.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of the advantages for you as an investor, so you touched on many of them, which is leverage, of course, so you actually can have a bigger pool. Also from the side of the startups, do you think that makes any difference at all, as we're talking about the value that investors can add?
It depends. I think for most startups, it's neutral. I think it doesn't affect anything. And when startups come to me and say, hey, should I raise money on AngelList? I say to them, there's actually no such thing as raising money on AngelList. You raise money from a lead on AngelList, like me or like Doug Scott or like, the other Gil Pacina, who runs a number of very large syndicates. You raise money from one of those people. Right. You don't raise money from AngelList, right? Just like you don't really raise money from Index or Excel or Sequoia, you raise money from a partner at one of those funds, right? That's an important thing. I think in some cases, for startups that want visibility with entrepreneurs and want, I'm dealing with one company right now that sells development tools to the startup community, and they see a benefit from having their company available on AngelList, and we actually got some great investors through that process. That will hopefully give them more exposure. So in some cases there is a benefit, but my focus is on making sure that there's no downside.
Cool. Let's touch a little bit on how you measure success with startups, or how startups that you invested in report success to you. So if we think about the metrics, and especially I think in B2B and SaaS, there are more metrics than probably startups. It's just a lot of things to track. Do you think that there is one or two that everyone should bear in mind, or it depends? What are your thoughts on it?
I think unfortunately it depends, right? I think metrics are very important, and I think the important part of metrics are what they teach it's the CEO and the management team. It's what they learn from it. It's not what the board. This is not about like reporting to your teacher in school. You know, it's maybe the board can coach or the VCs can coach and make sure that the founders are getting what they need from the metrics, right? So there's no. I try to take a very non-formulaic approach to metrics. What I insist on is that the founders I work with can express how they are thinking about their metrics, right? Which metrics are you showing me? What do they actually mean? Not what do they mean to me, what do they mean to you, right? If the metric goes up or down, do you...
Based on the context of their business.
So, and it's very, very specific. So if they say, you know, I've had a case just recently where a company says, you know, here's the metric, we have active users and we have cumulative users and all these things. And I'm like, okay, in your case, what is an active user and why do you care? Because maybe in your case, active user isn't the number you need. You need, so we developed a metric, you know, it's not like a brilliant thing, but it's the number of credit cards that they have collected is actually the metric that we need to watch and we need to grow. Because they have 10,000 developers using this thing, but they also have, you know, X credit cards, and it's a nice number, and it's growing really fast. And that's the number that we need to watch, because that signals intent to pay, and it signals that someone is really using this the way they intend to use it. So. But it's that dialogue between the board and the founders and themselves. And okay, why are we tracking this? Right? And then a lot of good things flow from that conversation.
Great. No, I think that makes sense. So we need to think about not only metrics or the metrics that make sense, but the why is probably more important. And it's important for startups to report on that internally, but also to communicate with investors and all of that.
And the more innovative your business, the more you need flexibility to really think through the metrics, right? I mean, the thing I really hate about metrics is when people are intellectually lazy about metrics. Like, I have 10% month-on-month growth in some metric that someone told me is interesting, or I'm doing cohort analysis. Okay, but you're doing cohort analysis on which metric? You know, obviously cohorts are important and a very powerful tool, but you know, you need to use these things thoughtfully.
Yeah, makes sense. So we have 2 more minutes. So I have one topic that I still want to cover, but we'll have a few minutes we have 2 minutes for Q&A. So if you have any questions, start thinking about them. But the last topic I want to cover is on what's coming next. So just about what you see that after many years in B2B, you've seen many trends appearing. How do you see that? What excites you about the future of enterprise software and SaaS?
Sure. So I think we were chatting about this earlier. I think about 8 years ago, a pretty senior VC that I was working with said something that to me was really interesting. He said, you know, we were looking at some startup that was doing like capturing data from some enterprise process, like retail or something. And his previous life, he'd been a systems integrator. And he said, look, every single process, this was like 2007, he's like, by now, every single process in the enterprise that can be digitally captured has been digitally captured and thrown into a database somewhere, right? And that was done. And what he's saying is like, that's over, right? There's no more money to be made from capturing, on the margins, yes, but fundamentally, there's no more money to be made from capturing new data from these kind of things, right? Then we had this whole wave of big data, which was really business intelligence 2.0, and all the data was sitting in the database, but you couldn't process it. You couldn't do anything useful with it in an ad hoc way. And now what we've got, and then we had this brief wave, if you remember, like Hadoop and unstructured data, where there were new kinds of data like text and other things that weren't structured, so you can start to extract insight from that kind of stuff, right? Now we're seeing, and Splunk and a bunch of other things fit into that category. Now we're seeing, I would say, another wave, which is this AI wave, which is, okay, wait a second. Once I have all the data, which was finished around 2005, 7, 8, and I'm able to crunch it, which was finished around now, right? Now I'm able to apply machine intelligence to that data and actually start to make decisions on that data. And I think that's what we're seeing. So we're seeing, we're seeing the evolution from rule-based systems and decision support systems where a person would make a call based on some information that was being presented to them. We're seeing more and more enterprises start to close the loop completely and fully automate that cycle, given that the data exists, it's analyzable, and now the machines have the ability to actually learn from it in ways, and that's the power of deep learning and machine intelligence. It's really not about throwing an algorithm at a bunch of data. It's about figuring out new algorithms that a human couldn't have come up with on their own, and sort of related to what you do. Mm-hmm. And I think every startup, or not every startup, but many, many startups that I see are playing to this theme in various ways. And so I think that's like the next wave. I think what comes after that, I'm actually not sure what comes after that. I think we're going to see 10, 15 years of that. I do think there's this question, which I sort of wake up with every morning, which is, okay, what comes after that? After we have all the data from everywhere, after we can crunch it all we want because compute power is not an issue anymore, and after we can close the loop fully and derive the decision algorithms that we need, right, and know that they're good and optimize them automatically, what comes next for the enterprise? And I think that's an open question, and I don't think we know the answer, but I'm looking for it. So if you know the answer, please contact me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I know. Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess I unconsciously dressed in white, so I'm the angel that comes and just ends the party. I'm so sorry.